the flux capacitor is fluxing. So that must mean it's time to talk about Back to the Future. And the way we're going to look at this classic movie is through some of the memorabilia from 1985, the year the film was released. So if you remember my video about lobby cards, you'll know that here is a lobby card for Back to the Future from 1985. And over here we have the border, which is the classic art for the original poster. The art is by Drew Struzan, the famous artist who has created so many movie posters. And of course we see Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly and Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown. And speaking of the movie art, we see it on the cover of the tie-in paperback from 1985. And anybody that's read this book knows that one of the most intriguing parts about it is that it's based on an earlier version of the script that was changed before filming began. For example, the opening sequence of this book is Marty McFly in a high school science class, and he's wearing his mirrored sunglasses, and we were to see reflected in his sunglasses the film that he was watching, which was about nuclear weapons. As we all know, that opening was completely changed to start in Doc Brown's workshop with all the clocks ticking, and it's really a brilliant opening, very clever, and sets the whole film up. So there's a lot of differences between the movie and this book, and that makes it a very interesting collectible. There were also paperback versions, of course, for Back to the Future 2 and Back to the Future 3. So it's kind of fun to have all three. And speaking of the story, here's something called Back to the Future, The Story, which is kind of a storybook treatment of the film and has some really wonderful color photos all the way through it. We'll just take a quick look at some of them. And of course the back cover. It's really fun. Now, if you recall my video about roadshow movie programs, this is a program that was released for Back to the Future, even though it's not a roadshow movie, that was published in Japan. And it has some great photos as well. Here's the DeLorean time machine. But one of the most fun things about it is a photo that I never saw before until I saw this book. I don't know how well you can see it, but down here we have Michael J. Fox, Crispin Glover as his father, and this is set in the present of 1985. And this photo is shot from the opposite vantage point of what we see on the screen. So we see the camera and we see Robert Zemeckis, the director. And it's just this really rare type of behind the scenes photo that, again, I had never seen. So this is very, very cool, even though because I don't read Japanese, I'm not really sure what any of it says. Again, the modern day version of the Roadshow movie program are these magazines, and this was issued in 1985 with the release of the movie. It's called the Official Collector's Edition. This magazine says all about the time machine, 100 photos and art, tell a complete story. But this souvenir magazine also tells lots of behind the scenes stories of the production of the film. Lots of anecdotes about the filming. Down here, again, we see Robert Zemeckis with the camera on a dolly following Michael J. Fox as he walks through the town square in 1955. So very cool. But you'll note here it says, free Michael J. Fox poster inside. Well, that's very cool. Let's take a look at that. So here is the poster. Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly sitting on the DeLorean. And it's a shot you don't see all the time. So it's very cool. I was listening to a Back to the Future podcast, and one of the Back to the Future fans that's on that show was saying that he had this poster in his bedroom as a teenager, and he couldn't understand why his friends were making fun of him for it. And he finally realized, well, that's because it's mostly teenage girls that would have this poster. Well, we can all relate to that, can't we? Oh, wait, you can't relate to that? Oh, well, I can. But anyhow, the really fascinating part of this poster, I think, is the reverse, because we have the Time Machine fact sheet, which has some really awesome diagrams of the DeLorean, some pre-production art of the special effects for the DeLorean's journey into the future or the past. Now that is very, very cool. Now here's something you wouldn't see all the time just lying around, because this was not created for the public as these publications were. This is the press kit that would have been prepared by the publicity department of Universal Studios to send out to newspapers and magazines in the hopes that they would promote the movie. These press kits were done by every studio for every movie. So it's always really fun to get a hold of one for a favorite movie like Back to the Future. And it's a little hard to see. Kind of have to feel it. That cool Universal logo is kind of embossed here below the Back to the Future logo. And it's on the back, and it's a little small, it's hard to see. But inside would be photographs such as Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly. And here we have Marty and Doc Brown with the DeLorean. And there's 9 of these black and white photographs that a newspaper could run or a magazine. And then there's also all these press releases, again with the great Universal Studios logo, incorporating the globe, which is sort of their trademark from their opening titles. And here we have production notes, which tells a lot of behind-the-scenes stories. Here's a press release about Robert Zemeckis and his making of the film, and the biographies of the stars, like this one from Michael J. Fox. And there's a lot of great quotes and a lot of great details that you really don't see anywhere else. So that's one reason I like these press releases, is that they have a lot of fascinating facts, as it were, that you're just not going to see anywhere else. They're dated June 5th, 1985. The movie was released on July 3rd, 1985. And it's part of the whole story of Back to the Future that sort of at the last moment, the original release date of July 19th was changed so that this movie that Universal Studios knew was going to be a big hit was released instead just ahead of July 4th to really capitalize on that whole holiday weekend. And that year, July 3rd was on a Wednesday. So the July 4th weekend was quite long. I also have an earlier press release that would have been sent out earlier in 1985 to help announce the film, get media outlets excited about it and intrigued. So this is much shorter. But one reason we can tell that it was earlier is that the Back to the Future logo had not been finalized. Certainly this logo is one of the most famous for any film because it's one that's been used consistently since 1985. There's never been a different logo treatment ever used for any of the theatrical releases or the home video releases or on television or any official publication or venue except this one. And that's fairly uncommon. So it's almost startling to see this earlier treatment. But you can see the roots of the famous logo here in this sort of preliminary version. Also, along with the release of the movie, came things like postcards and buttons, all kinds of things. You can see some of them here in a photo of some of my Back to the Future collection. Also issued with a big movie like Back to the Future would be the Back to the Future original soundtrack album, which you see a picture of here with that famous art. But this single that I'm holding is actually even more interesting than that, because it's of the song Johnny Be Good as performed by Marty McFly and the Starlighters, and this is actually a remix produced by Bones Howe. The original version is on the main album. Of course, one of the most interesting things about Johnny Be Good is that it's not actually sung by Michael J. Fox. So in the movie and on this record, you hear Mark Campbell singing as Marty, and it's quite remarkable that it really does sound like Michael J. Fox, right down to the little rasp in his voice. Michael J. Fox is also quite the guitar player, so he's able to act that guitar performance quite well. But what you hear in the movie and on the record is Tim May playing the guitar. And it's just really fun to see that classic shot of Marty leaping as he's really going to town with his guitar here. So, of course, with a big hit like Back to the Future, and it was a smash, the most popular movie released in 1985, you had the home video release, which was going to be a big deal. So there was special publicity material created to promote the release of the video cassette in 1986. So I feel really lucky to have this counter standee in my collection, and it is designed so that the home video store could place it right on their counter and remind everybody that the future is here, because they had been promoting the release of the video cassette of Back to the Future as the future will be here soon, that sort of thing. And of course it uses the famous poster art, but kind of gives it this three-dimensional effect by having this figure of Marty brought out. The DeLorean's door is back here. And what's supposed to happen is that the cassette itself, which is in kind of this box back here, it has this little lid. The mechanism back here was the battery. When it's turned on, it would lift the cassette up and then drop it back down and keep repeating. So there would be no way that anyone could miss the fact that, as it says here, Back to the Future is now available on video cassette. And don't forget, the soundtrack is also available on MCA records and cassettes. They were still selling that. So this is just a very cool display that's fun to see. It works with some encouragement. So there you have it, a glimpse at some of my Back to the Future collection. We'll be revisiting Back to the Future again in the future because it's one of my favorite movies. And after all, it's our density. But our next video, to be produced sometime in the future, is about the future. Everyone's interested in the future because that's where you and I will be spending the rest of our lives. See you then.